The farmers have increased their prices. We don't even get enough of the produce. It's Thursday at Agbogboshi Market here in Accra. Hundreds of residents looking for bargain on food items visit here for their groceries and other items. This afternoon is no different, as busy as always. The price of a bottle of oil is now selling at 30 cedis, and the gallon is going for 400 cedis. I can't even afford it. Prices are up many times, and in some cases beyond the means of these patrons. Inflation hit a 10-year high in March 2022, and in the markets, the evidence is not difficult to come by. Traders say they are feeling the pinch because their clients struggle to pay even if they are willing to buy. Elizabeth has been selling in this market for years. The market is slow. Customers drive a hard bargain when they come to buy, many times lower than we prefer. We incur a lot of loss. If not, our vegetables will go bad.
Cooking oil.
We are suffering. We have increased the prices of the vegetables and the customers can't buy. The oil is going for 30 cedis. Garden eggs are now sold for 25 cedis.
And 15, 25. But what the bahas cry when you be manito. If it's almost more bread with Curentino, almost almost.
Florence Ambega is a mother of 5. She's come to Agbogboshi to shop for her home, but her pocket has been impacted heavily by inflation. All she's got is 300 cedis to pay for the increased food items, aside the hike in her transport fare.
Things are so difficult for us that we cannot even bear. Sometimes I do bring 100 cedis to the market, but today I brought 300. Even that 300, it will not help us. It will not be sufficient for me to buy anything. The reason, because when you go, they have increased everything. Even oil. The other time I bought a liter of oil, 12 cedis. Now it's 250, 25 cedis rather. And a gallon of Kufor's gallon is now 4 something. Why formally we have been buying 320? It's difficult for us. It's too difficult for us. If you have a kid about 5, how are you going to feed them? So we are suffering. We are suffering.
The traders are desperate. They are afraid of what lies ahead of them and are demanding that government rolls out some interventions to bring some relief to them. We sit here all day and sell nothing. We are really frustrated.
Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. Time now for us to hit our big stories. We'll be telling you about surging food prices. And Kojo, this appears, it appears that this may not be leaving us anytime soon, as it affects both the rich and the poor as well. Give us some details on that.
Well, so we're talking about the inflation, the inflation in its entirety, and looking at the food aspect of it. Now, if you look at the food aspect, per what we have, the details that we have in front of us, it says that food inflation hovered around 22.4%, you know, and that is a lot. If you look at transport inflation as well, it did around 27.6%. So it tells
and the transport, the fuel bit, for example, has definitely impacted food prices as well. Because when fuel prices go up, food prices also go up.
In a way, because if I go and bring something from Techiman, I would have to calculate how much I'm spending on transport to be part of the final pricing of the product.
Right.
And so the fuel or transportation prices will also affect the crop prices as well. So if we are focusing on the food aspect of the whole inflation rate, it climbed to 22.4% from 17.4 in February.
Yeah.
It was 7.
And February was quite,
in February.
the month when it comes to food pricing.
Yes.
February leading into March, because these details come from the month of March.
And it jumps from there to 22.4. I mean, that's by how many percentage?
That's quite a lot.
I mean, 5. 17.4 to 22.4.
Right.
5.
5 percentage points.
Yeah.
Within a short.
Yeah, exactly. And we're February and March, within a space of a month, if we want to calculate it by that, 5%, that's huge. And it's all because the cost of input are rising. And I spoke to the technical advisor at the Ministry of Agri last 2 weeks, and he says, for example, the cost of fertilizer is still going to go up because we import about 40% of our fertilizer from Russia and Ukraine.
Right.
And so whilst
so that means what? 4 out of 10.
Exactly. It's coming out from Russia and Ukraine.
Is practically going to be impacted.
Exactly. So as we are having, to import from other areas, of course, the price will go up. So it doesn't look like we're going to have a reduction anytime soon.
And fertilizer prices were already inching up even before this crisis. So it just goes to make the problem even worse. But how do we get around this challenge? How do we circumvent it? And we'll be engaging some industry players. The president of the Peasant Farmers Association, Dr. Charles Nyaba, joins the conversation. We'll also be speaking to an agric economist, Dr. Albert Obeng Mensah, an agric economist, and Anthony Morrison, CEO of the Chamber of Agri Business. All of them join the conversation. Maybe your quick take before we get...
Just before, let's run listeners through the price of fertilizer.
Exactly.
In 2018, fertilizer was selling at 80 cedis. In 2019, it jumped to 90 cedis. In 2020, it came to 120 cedis. And then it increased to 200 cedis in 2021. Now, it has increased to 400 Ghana cedis. So that's how much fertilizer has been moved from 2018, which was selling at 80 cedis, to 400 in 2022. So it tells you the quantum of leap we've had in terms of just fertilizer alone. And that is what is also partly what is pushing the price of food up.
Let me say a very good morning to Anthony Morrison, Dr. Nyaba, and Obeng as well. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Kojo.
Okay, looks like we have everyone on board. I'll start with you, Anthony Morrison, CEO Chamber of Agribusiness. It's good to have you, my brother. Now, when you look at the recent inflation rates when it comes to food, and I've had discussions with some of your colleagues on the back of high cost of fertilizer, high cost of labor, and basically everything else in the food chain or the value chain rising. How did it hit you, the sort of percentages or the sort of rise we have seen in recent times?
Yes, Benjamin, thank you very much, and a very good morning to my very good brothers in this, on the line with me, Dr. Nyaba and his other colleague. Yes, you see, we have come to this point because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's be very analytical with it. The pandemic has been very disruptive, and it's also influenced the supply chain or the global logistical supply chain. Even without the Ukraine-Russia war, we were actually going to start picking up with regards to fertilizer from May, June, thereabout, because we knew that the likes of Yara were coming on board from UK productivity. Those of China were coming on board because they had closed down as a result of the pandemic. They actually closed down. So they were coming on board. Now, with the Ukraine-Russia war coming in, we had that challenge with fuel already. Anytime there is a fuel increment, it affects everything across board. So we had challenges with that. It affected transportation. And in Ghana, our food transportation is not hinged on railway system.
Right.
It is actually hinged on vehicular movement. So it's very expensive to move food or to put your food transportation on this sort of thing. Now, going forward, you will also see the quantum by which the fertilizer prices have, or the percentage, have jumped. For me, if our food system was that robust, if you look at the Economic Intelligence Unit, it stated clearly that our food policies were not aligned, they were not harmonized, government wasn't committed to the deliverables that they promised to, and also our content were not properly situated within the global food system. So we need, there seems to be that dichotomy, there seems to be that disruption, even in our own system. So we need to look at it very well. Now, we can narrow this to a number of points, but I also think that the generality of the industry has not been moving very well. And this exposes us within the few months, 1.5 months, 2 months that we've had this Russian-Ukraine war. If our system was very strong, robust, we shouldn't be feeling the rising cost as it stands now.
Mr. Morrison, we've always been talking about how we are quite gullible to the changes on the international market. For you and your how you've been in this field for some time, what do you think is that thing we can do as a nation for us to stop how we become affected by anything that happens on the international market? Recently, I know there's a fertilizer factory that was launched somewhere in the eastern region. Isn't it where we should look at to say, let's produce some of these things in here so we won't be exposed to these happenings on the international market and how they affect our farming?
Yes, certainly. For us, the Chamber has always done a number of research and proposed solutions to government. First, we need to look at local content. For instance, we are the second largest producer of cocoa. What do we use the cocoa pods for? Okay, cocoa pods alone can provide potash, can provide some serious nutritional deposit for the soil. But what do we use them for? We produce huge quantities of cashew and several others. Now, we need to look at how we can develop the local content policy for agricultural productivity. Then again, there's something we have been working with the African Union and FAO, agribusiness PPP partnership. How do we get the private sector into this whole conversation? When I say the private sector, I'm talking about the corporate industry in Ghana. Because when we import some of the maize and starch from soya, wheat, Brazil, and places like that, these places are supported heavily by the corporate industry and not government. So we need to also look at that discussion. And you see, it's very difficult to get government to have buy-in into some of the activities from organizations like that, because governments have their own politically designed programs. And if your program does not align to them, they are not going to accept it. We also need to look at how we can make use of technology. Okay? Recently, 2 weeks ago, Parliament was looking at a project that government was going to take $25 million from a German bank to finance an Indian company to set up an assembly plant here in Ghana. Is that the way to go? Okay. So we need, there is so many, how do you call it, non-aligned stuff we are doing in the industry, which does not support the big picture. For instance, we have been exploring petroleum for how many years now? And we've fled the gas. Why can't we, up to now, make sure that we are doing urea? Okay? I think the previous government started something like the fertilizer factory.
Right.
What has prevented us from completing that model? Okay? So Nigeria have their urea. But I also think that as a country and as business, government should take itself completely away from the agriculture sector. The agriculture sector is not for government to play with. Government is supposed to make sure they have the regulatory measures, and that is why I have been calling for the setting up of the Agriculture Regulatory Authority. Nobody, apart from MOFA, we are not seeing any serious work from government on the agriculture front. And for that matter, when you take an industry that is trade priority, okay, and you are not regulating it, everything we do here is trade, from skills to consultancy to technology to seeds and everything. It's trade. So you need a regulator to be in there. Now, the other issue is that when you are not informing or adding data, or your project, your proposal, your whatever you do is not informed by robust and timely data, these are the kind of challenges you face. Because, look, as it stands now, as a country, we do not have a centralized, on-screen, timely data to show that, okay, this is the incoming field or farms that are coming on board. And this is the quantum of maize, soya, rice they are bringing on board, and this is the location they are coming from. We do not have it. When it comes to vegetables, same. We do not have any dashboard that is showing that this is what we have. We do not have an agricultural information management system. It's as simple as that. So we pick things on paper and assistance now. Even the census that we spend millions of dollars to do is still sitting on people's desks and shelves in the offices.
So important points you've made, Mr. Morrison, and that was my colleague who came in, who interjected, Samuel Kojo Brace. Just for the rest of you, so we know whom we're interacting with. So it is with yours truly and Samuel Kojo Brace as well, who is co-hosting with me. But for you, Dr. Obeng Mensah, as an agric economist, I just want you to take a quick swipe at two issues. One, the bit about whether we could have averted this situation. On a global scale, there is the problem to do with the Ukraine-Russia war, COVID-19 and surging prices. But beyond that, my first question, could we have forestalled some of the impact we are seeing? Because the inflationary rates are stark, they are high. And the other bit I want you to quickly address, maybe before you get into the first question I posed. Tony Morrison says the government, if you like, should be taken out, or it should get itself out of the agri sector. They are not contributing much. How do you feel about that? What's your quick reaction, Dr. Obeng Mensah?
Thank you very much. And I would like to say a quick good morning to all your treasured viewers and also to my colleagues who are on the panel. Yeah, I'll mention Tony's indication that government must take itself off agriculture. Well, to some extent, yes, and to some extent, too, no. Because I'm in close contact with the MOFA, and I know what they are doing in terms of training farmers, training processors, on the small scale level, not the big processes and others, but at the micro level.
So just to clarify for those watching us, MOFA is the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. Yeah. For those who may not, when you say MOFA, someone may be lost. So
MOFA, thank you very much for that clarification. MOFA is the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and they have the extension officers and their district agricultural officers. I'm very close to them, and they are doing quite a lot in up the capacity of farmers as well as microprocessors and others. And I think that is quite a good job from the government end. And so taking them off, then maybe we are placing them under a unit which will help them more to carry on with what they are already doing. And that it deals with the administration and other things in government. But talking about the other sector, agriculture is the core of everything. From the forerunning interviews that you did on the market, you were talking to people on the market. Unfortunately, there was no interview for people on the agricultural field. And if you are talk to the agricultural people, the farmers themselves, then you will see that they are doing what they are capable of doing within the constraints that surround their job. Agriculture is on the ground, and they are facing the problem of fertilizer. Our soils are getting poorer and poorer day in, day out, and they need a fertilizer. They need some kind of agricultural inputs like agrochemicals and tools. One thing, one major thing missing in farming on the ground now is farm labor. Farm labor. Most of our young people who have the strength to serve as the mass farm labor force, they are now in school because of new trends in our educational system. Now we have free compulsory basic education, then we have free secondary education. These are taking almost all the people from the farming areas. It is not bad at all. It is good. From a secondary school, they are proceeding to university and other tertiary institutions. So we are losing a lot of farm labor. What we ought to have done is to replace the missing farm labor with small-scale equipment that's appropriate technology and tools that are easy to handle but very helpful in replacing the farm labor. Where is it? We don't have it. But fortunately, from the interviews you conducted, you see that still there are some food market, and that's what I'm happy about. We still have food, but the prices are rising. I was asked, are the rising prices adding some income to the farmer? And if you trace it down, then you see that the farmers are not receiving any extra income from their properties. All the additions are going to those who take it from the farmers and deliver the goods step by step to the consumer, which means the farmer is not a problem now. I think when people was at all because production was not there. But now it is the value chain from the farmer to the consumer that are responsible for the added cost in food prices. And they have their reasons: rising fuel prices, rising cost of transportation, a rising cost of services, and other things. And so we must look at it from that end. But I am an agricultural person, and therefore I usually want to look at it from the farmer's point of view. Tony talked about prices of fertilizer. That was perfect. If the farmer buys one bag of fertilizer and there is an additional cost to it, if the farmer hires labor, a person or a machinery, and there's added cost, then of course he or she cannot sell her produce as he used to sell it yesterday. And we all know that when you put a seed in the soil, it's not going to take just 2 or 3 days to come up. It takes a number of days. And therefore, this rapid increase in cost is not coming from the farmer, but it is coming from the off-takers from the farmer. And so when we have to talk about it, then the farmer does not actually gain anything from this rising cost of food, but the other actors. From the market, you realize that...
Dr. Mensah?
Yeah.
Yeah, could you brace here?
Yes, please, my brother.
We've spoken about all of this, and I'm sure in our years in the university and all the years we've done at Greek, we've been talking about the challenges that has to deal with making sure that the farmer is better off and how the value chain is also impacting on the final prices. How can we tackle this?
Yeah.
Where do we start from?
We start from providing the farmer with the necessary inputs for farming. And I've mentioned labor. Labor is not missing, almost completely missing. When labor is missing, the farmer cannot be better off. When labor is missing, then we need to adequately replace the labor with technology. And we have, as I'm speaking, I'm sorry to say, we have not developed appropriate small-scale technologies to replace the missing labor force. And that still puts the farmer at a disadvantage. When you come even to the animal sector, poultry, farming, and small ruminant farming, I'm not talking about cattle because you don't have a lot of them here in Ghana, but talking about small ruminant farming and poultry farming and other animal farming, still, we have not developed appropriate technologies that will help the farmer to have some relief in the form of labor input. And so we have put the farmer at any advantageous position yet. And so the level of production still remains low. And you know, from economics, when the supply of goods automatically it will affect the price of goods. But that is not the only reason for the high hikes in the food prices.
Okay.
People can think of fuel price increases. Yeah. So the farmer, what I'm saying is that the farmer is actually not the cost of this high fuel, high cost of food on the market.
Fortunately, we have a member of the Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana, Dr. Charles Nyaba, with us here. Doc, you've listened to Dr. Mensah talking about the fact that the farmer is not to be blamed for the rising cost of food prices on the market. What's your take on that? Let's start from that point. What's your take on where Doc ended?
Okay. Good morning to yourself. Let me also say good morning to my fellow panelists and our members who are listening to us this morning. I think I agree completely that we should rather pat the farmer on the back for holding the economy in the COVID crisis since 2019 to date. We have been producing at a loss, but we just thought that it's our duty to contribute to the stability of the nation. That's why we've been doing that. Because if you take from 2019 to date, cost of production of almost every input, apart from the land that was given to us by nature and rains that we get free from God, has increased astronomically. And the private sector actors who attempted to actually join the farming, have done some small analysis. Most of them have to pull out. But we, the farmers, still remain to help provide food to stabilize the economy. So it will be unfortunate for anybody to try to associate the current crisis to the farmer that we are charging high for food items or whatever. That would be my take. But I would like us to reflect a bit back, to look at what brought about this whole fertilizer subsidy program. If you remember, in the period 2008 and 2009, there were global serious food crises. And many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, including Ghana, Nigeria, Malawi, have to reflect back and see whether fertilizer subsidy was an option. This was because at the time, before realized that to be able to restore our economy, we need to focus on agriculture. And one of the key cardinal points that was considered was that our production was very low. And it came out that our fertilizer utilization was low compared to all other sub-Saharan African countries. So before decided to introduce the fertilizer subsidy program in 2009. And there was a reason. The reason was to increase our yield per acre and to ensure that there was enough food and also to create jobs and also to stabilize the economy. And since that period to now, we all saw the impact of the fertilizer subsidy program. So I differ to agree with Farmer Morrison that we need to actually, MOFA need to stay away from or government need to stay away from the agriculture sector, because even if you look at the developed countries like Thailand, like United States of America, like Russia, we must talk about, like China, they subsidize their farming. Thailand rice could not have competed with our rice without subsidy. Thailand gives zero interest rate loans to farmers. Japan gives -4 interest to farmers, which means that if you take loan from a bank in Japan that you are going into agriculture, they pay you 4% of that if you took the loan and used for agriculture activity. So it will be unfortunate for us to even start thinking about withdrawing subsidies to farmers. Now, let's look at the various components that are causing the recent high price of food and shortage in the various markets. In 2021, just like we said earlier, we started the season with government inability, even though the fertilizer subsidy policy was there, but government failed to actually pay for what the importers had delivered earlier. That was in 2020. So we drew government attention that if the monies were not settled, it was going to impact on farmers' access to fertilizer. And if you look at the areas where we get greater quantities of our cereals, legumes, and other vegetables, in northern part of the country. And this part of the country, the lands in recent times are infertile. If you don't support the land with fertilizer, the yield, you are likely to get very, very low yield. So we drew government attention that something must be done. Otherwise, we were taking signals from the companies that if they were not paid, they are not going to deliver. Government didn't heed to our recommendations. Now, the same last year, input prices were very high. Even there were instances, importation of some inputs like tractors, agrochemicals, and other farm equipment was impossible. So now, in the middle of the season, when we started, there were also droughts, and along the lines, there were flooding. So all this contributed to the limited food that we have at the moment. Now, let's look at 2022. My concern is 2022 and in going forward. As we stand, last year, this time around, even though the crisis was there, government had asked the fertilizer companies to start releasing fertilizer in the market. I have spoken to most of the fertilizer companies. None of them are willing to actually supply the subsidized price that government has given them. According to them, government have not paid some of them even a peso for what they delivered in 2020. Mm-hmm. For 2021, no fertilizer company has received any payment for what they delivered. So far, government-owned fertilizer company for 2020, 86 million Ghana that they are yet to pay them. So with all this, I think the fertilizer company were still willing to still get some credit and bring more fertilizer in 2022. They went to most of the banks to look for LC. I did all this investigation, and the banks refused. They said they cannot rely on government because now the government is complaining about the lack of funds, crisis, and they are not able to pay them for what they delivered in 2020. So if they give them LC and they bring the product, what is the guarantee that government will pay them what they owe them in 2020 and 2021 and that of 2022? And as we speak, we are not getting any signal from the Ministry of Finance whether they will be paying 2021 or not. I'm told what is budgeted or what is casted in the 2022 budget, that money for the fertilizer subsidy is going to be used to pay part of 2020 delivery. But they are not even talking about 2021, which I think is very unfortunate. So for us, we think that looking at the crisis moment, if you talk about the food price, the inflation that we are talking about, food price inflation less. So if you're able to bring the food prices down, I think it will smoothen the level of inflation that we are experiencing. Right. But we are not doing things that will lead to we bringing that down. So for us to be able to address that challenge, we need to seriously focus on cost of production for the farmers. And fertilizer is one of them. High cost of mechanization services is another. High cost of fuel is another. The other factor that, in the very short run, we cannot say government should address, has to do with climate change and the water. But cost of fertilizer and cost of mechanization is within the control of government, which I think they need to do with an immediate effect.
Okay, Dr. Nyaba, Benjamin here. It's interesting you bring up these points because that is exactly what I feel Farmer Morrison or Tony Morrison was referencing. So you've just mentioned in the last few seconds, you've spoken about the high cost of fuel, you've spoken about the high cost of mechanization, and then you've spoken about climate issues. Of course, that's a global issue that every country has to grapple with. But even there, would you say that we've done enough? So the question is, if government has been in here, look at what you were saying about fertilizer prices and all of that. We have not taken the initiative from over 60 years ago when there were some initiatives to, set ourselves up when it comes to fertilizer production. Look at us, 64 years on. We now have to fall on Dangote for fertilizer, even when we are, a petroleum producing entity ourselves. So don't you think that is the angling that administration in and out, we have benefited from agriculture as one of the backbones of our economy, but not much has been invested in it. You were talking about the fact that even going for a loan to do business, look at how complicated it is. How much have our governments in and out done to ensure that a farmer can have access to good loans at very good prices and then, incentivize it. So when you look at all of these, don't you feel that apart from the few subsidies here and subsidies there, there's still so much work to be done and so much more that rests on the shoulders of our governments?
I think on that bit, I perfectly agree with Farmer Morrison that government still has a role to play here. In going forward, we need to focus on establishing our own fertilizer plant. And this doesn't necessarily have to be only chemical fertilizer plant. We could also consider organic fertilizer plant. But to be able to do that, any company that is having the intention of doing that will still need government support. Because if you're going to bank for loan, the kind of loan that we are taking, the banks will need a guarantee from government that when you do this, we'll be able to facilitate the process. And that is not there. 3 years ago, there was plans. We even launched a plan as part of the fertilizer expansion program to establish fertilizer factory in Ghana. Even the Moroccans came to do they came to do the visibility study. I don't know why we are not yet there. So to me, that is something that we cannot even negotiate. But in the short run, we are talking about addressing the issue at hand now, because we can't carry this to 2023. Because what happened in 2021 that we are currently here, the issues in 2022 are even much intensity than what happened in 2021. So if you don't address those issues, in 2023, it's going to be much worse. So for us, we are thinking that in the very short run, government should mobilize resources and settle these companies and order them to start releasing the fertilizer to the farmers. Once we are able to do that and farmers increase their production, we will stabilize the system. Then we will now put in plans to ensure that we attract private companies to come in and establish fertilizer manufacturing in the country. Now, let me tell you, it's not as easy as we always say in terms of establishing fertilizer manufacturing companies here. Look, what Dangote is doing is only urea. It's not a compound fertilizer. So to establish a fertilizer company in Ghana, you will virtually be importing almost every raw material to be able to do that, which goes with a lot of resources. The machinery that we need to use for the production itself is huge.
Doc, so I'm saying that is not beyond us. And if we had taken that initiative years ago, I admit, it's a complicated process, but if we had forethought and done this, because now we've been caught pants down. I mean, which is worse? Now that our farmers have to buy, and you are in the thick of things, have to buy fertilizers at this huge cost with the inflation, or to have had our own processing plant here over the years developed where, it would be cheaper for the ordinary farmer. I mean, when you weigh them.
Yeah, so I agree. You see, I'm not disputing the fact that we need to have our own manufacturing plant in Ghana. It is the best to go, and it's something that we should all advocate for. But before we are able to do that, I think the first thing government need to do, let's address the short-term issue first. Now, in going forward, what government need to do is to actually take the politics out of investment in the agriculture sector. There is so much politics going on, such that an individual investor who doesn't want to play into that balance will find it very difficult to actually penetrate. There are people, there are investors who came to this country willing to invest in one area or the other, but because of the policy, they have to withdraw. I told you there was a feasibility study that was done by Morocco. Everything was set up for the fertilizer manufacturing company to be established. That never happened for several reasons I'm not ready to discuss on air. So for us to be able to get there, we need to first address too much interference in private investment when it comes to the agriculture sector. But I was only saying that in the short run, let's see what we can deal with, what we have at hand, so that in 2023, we will not be here discussing about the same issue.
Let's turn our attention to Farmer Morrison. Mr. Morrison, we say that we've been playing a lot of lip service to the agri sector. For you, what do you think we should be doing now to deal with this, such that, like Dr. Nyaba said, we don't have to come back to this conversation again?
Yes, thank you very much. Before I answer your question, I just want to clarify something. When I said government should take itself from agriculture, I'm saying that government should take itself from the trade component of agriculture. For instance, importation of, tractors and all the things that government imports. Government has no role in importing some of these things. What we also need to do is that, yes, of course, there is nowhere advanced country in this world where subsidies for agriculture has worked. So we need to also take subsidies out. However, what do we need to give to our farmers? What are their key challenges? Their key challenges is first, having access to tractors to plow, having access to good quality seed, having access to fertilizers. Now, what can government do to facilitate this? You see, government's role is to provide some externality. If you go to some of the major food production zones in the country, it will shock you to know how bad these roads are. And when you produce food, it can take you at least 5 days to drag a truck of food from the farm onto the main road. Okay? So we need, as we speak now, Ghana's post-harvest losses is so high. All right? So we need to currently be working seriously to curtail and reduce that post-harvest loss. We also need to reduce the dependency of importing seeds. As it stands now, Ghana does not have a national seed bank or a centralized seed bank. Okay? And also, when it comes to fertilizer, I strongly believe that we have what it takes to set up our own fertilizer plant. For instance, let's use even the neighboring countries. Togo have potash. So they do cement.
Tony, just a second. So Dr. Nyaba says that it will take quite some investment and all of that, which, I mean, if you look at it logically, it will take time as well. So are you saying that even now, we have what it takes, maybe within 2022, getting into 2023, to address that situation and maybe set up a plan? Because I've heard people say, even farmers say, that if we don't address some of these problems, next year will be an even worse year compared to this one. So address it from that angle for us, please.
Yes, I agree with him perfectly. But you see, from the point of the fertilizer, we are currently talking too much about the chemical-based fertilizer. Let's look at organic fertilizer. It can turn around within 6 to 12 months. We have a lot of depository materials that can be used for organic fertilizers. And this is where we need to go as a country. Is it possible we can just look at the organic fertilizer policy or the organic agriculture policy industry in Ghana? And that can also help with our health issues. Now, prices, predicting prices of food to keep increasing. Yes, of course, for the next 12 months, food prices are going to keep increasing because of the challenges that are available to us. What we need to understand is that, Ben, the politician sees agri as the opium of the people. It's a tool for politicians to use farmers to government or to power. If you can take government out of all this, okay, government should not have a role. If you want to provide services to your farmers as an MP, it's not a cutlass or seed that you need to provide, because there are major things you need to provide. Develop the roads, provide electricity, provide other externalities that will enhance that. We also need to look at these areas very well. If you go to some of the research institutions, for instance, University of Ghana, West Africa Center for Crop Improvement, TSIR, they have done a number of research that can be commercialized, especially on the field, on the areas of seed and fertilizer, organic fertilizer, but they are all lying on the shelf.
Okay.
Government,
Mr. Morrison,
we're talking about the development bank.
Let me thank you here and move to Dr. Mensah. Dr. Mensah, like Mr. Morrison is saying, we always say, let's construct the roads, let's do that. But if care is not taken, this will be recurrent. We'll come back again next year and talk about the roads have to be constructed. What must we do to ensure that all of those things are done? We've been talking about mechanizing our agriculture. We've heard in budget that we're going to set up mechanization centers and all of that. Yet little is being seen. So what can we do to ensure that these things are done, that we don't come here tomorrow to still talk about the same things?
Thank you very much. What Tony has said is very, very true. We need the roads, and we need transportable roads. What we can do is that once we say we have a decentralized government, where local government takes care of almost everything at the district level, we must, as a nation, demand some kind of accountability from our local government district offices. You know, we are talking about agric. None of us here know the budgetary allocation at the various districts for agriculture and how much of those allocations are actually used for agricultural purposes. We need to demand accountability for that. One thing is also that I don't want a situation where we will improve the capacity of farmers to produce, and then after production, they have their food getting rotten on their farms. As I speak now, when I'm traveling to my workplace, I can find lots of oranges getting rotten by the roadside. No buyers. And therefore, we also need to look at marketing. The marketing chain has to be looked at. So many people depend on the farmer for their income along the value chain from the farmer to the consumer. Yet, like Mr. Morrison was saying, we don't have any system where we can recoup some of the incomes generated by these people into the agricultural sector. They just buy something from the farmer and then they go and sell. We don't know who collects taxes from them. We don't know how the taxes are managed. Always the farmer is at the receiving end. And therefore, I think we need to have a look at the marketing chains and our food systems in the country.
Okay.
When we take cocoa
thank you very much. But in the next minute, you were speaking earlier that the farmers are not the cause for the increment, but the value chain.
Yeah.
What can we do to the value chain such that then we wouldn't have that high increase in food prices? Is there anything? Just in a minute, sir. Dr. Mensah.
Yeah. For instance, we can improve the quality of, let's say, have some processing equipment and training people to handle those processing equipment. When you have oil palm, for instance, when we have small-scale industries that can process oil palm, we have small-scale industries that can process our tomatoes, the glut on our farms will be minimized.
Okay.
And therefore, and then storage facilities are also very important for those storable goods like maize. Somebody was complaining about the high cost of kinky. Kinky is from maize, banku and other things are from maize. If we have enough maize stored when there's high production out of fertilizer production, provision and other things, then the maize can be stored, and government or any organization can subdue the high hikes in food prices by bringing in some of these stored commodities. And we don't have storage facilities, we don't have processing facilities, and therefore we get a lot of...
Dr. Albert Mensah, thank you so much for your time here. Dr. Nyaba, in the next minute, what would be your proposal going forward?
For me, we are ready to address the situation. We are ready to increase our productivity. As we speak, there are most of my colleagues who, on their own, manage to procure bulldozers and other things, clearing their land, waiting to the rains to come. What government can do, we are not saying that government should put additional resources into anything. We are saying that they should just pay what they own, the fertilizer imported. They should pay them what they own them in 2020, 2021. In going forward, if government thinks that the subsidy program is something that we all need to sit down and look at, that is something that we can discuss later. Therefore, in the very short run, we think that's what government needs to do.
Okay.
On the part of the farmers, I'm appealing to all of us. The organic manure is something that I propose, but it's not something that is going to address our problem for now. You cannot use only organic manure to boost your production. The volume of organic manure that you need to be able to turn the land around will take some time. So even if you use organic manure, we still need some amount of the chemical fertilizer to blend with it to be able to get the results we are looking for.
Okay.
I heard most of the farmers are resorting to buying poultry droppings from Doma and Techima, and they are keeping it down to use to apply on their crop. They need to tread with caution. First, poultry manure can be very toxic to the plant. Others tried it previous years and they lost their farm. So we need to be very cautious about that. So I just plead with, I'm appealing with government. We have a lot of proposals for them. If they open their doors, we will advise them.
All right, Dr. Nyaba, thank you very much for your time and for joining us here. Anthony Morrison, let's still give
CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness.
Exactly,
right.
But Mr. Morrison, so just a minute for me. What would be your proposal, one proposal to government as to how it can tackle all of this?
Thank you very much. First, government should just provide subsidies to corporate institutions so that they go straight into commercial agriculture farming. It is key. So, for instance, the tax exemptions, they can give tax exemptions to like MTN, like Talo, and the rest who can do 5,000 acres of commercial farms. All right? Then secondly, we need to now adopt organic farming. I'm not talking about organic manure. I'm talking about organic farming, most of which organic products are produced here in Ghana. Let us adopt it. And finally, government development bank should make sure that they use the development money to address the externalities. The fertilizer plants and all that should all be addressed coming from the development bank money. That's what we need.
Thank you very much, Morrison. Anthony Morrison is with the Chamber of Agribusiness. Dr. Albert Mensah. I know him to have been with the University of Cape Coast. I hope that's where he still is, with the Department of Agri-Economics. We also had Dr. Charles Nyaba of the Peasant Farmers Association.
Exactly.
Joining us on the show.
Well, refreshing conversation and pertinent, especially as we're looking for better times in 2023. And like I've said, some of those in this space have said that if we don't do the right things, just as Tony Morrison, Dr. Obeng Mensah, and Dr. Nyaba have been mentioning, we might see 2023 higher, even higher, food price inflation. And nobody wants that because we're already grappling with COVID-19 and this Russo-Ukrainian bit. But when we return after the break we're about to take, we're going to be talking governance. It's all about the 2021 Democracy Index. Now, our score has reduced from 54th position with an overall score of 6.75 in 2016 to 59th position with an overall score of 6.50 in 2020. We're telling you more about that right after the break.